Don't touch those documents. You're here to mop the floors, not read the fine print. The voice belonging to Marcus Thorne was not merely sharp. It was a shard of glass, designed to cut. It sliced through the hushed, pressurized atmosphere of the 80th floor boardroom, a sterile sanctuary of chrome and mahogany suspended in the clouds. Below, the city was a silent, sprawling circuit board. Up here, the only sound that mattered was the frantic beat of a multi-billion-dollar merger counting down to its final, agonizing hours. Loretta, the target of the shard, didn't flinch. Her hands, steady and capable, stopped their motion just an inch above the crisp white sheet of paper that had fluttered from the conference table. It lay on the deep pile of the charcoal carpet like a fallen feather. Her job was to notice things out of place, a smudge on the glass, a stray paper clip, a fallen document, and to set them right. It was a role she performed with a quiet, almost monastic discipline. She had been in the middle of emptying a small, elegant wastebasket, its contents a telling mixture of crumpled notes and empty espresso pods. Her movements were economical, silent. Her cart, parked discreetly by the door, was a model of efficiency, every bottle and cloth in its designated place. She was a ghost in a navy blue uniform, a necessary but unseen function of this high-stakes ecosystem. She was background noise, until she wasn't. Marcus Thorne stood over the table, his shoulders tight enough to snap. His suit was Savile Row, but it wore the day's anxiety in a series of fine wrinkles across the back. His tie was loosened just enough to signal controlled desperation. He was a man drowning in details he didn't fully comprehend, and his frustration needed a target. Loretta, by reaching for the fallen paper, had just become it. He didn't look at her, not really. He looked at her function, her uniform, the simple fact of her presence in a room where she didn't belong. The other men in the room, junior associates with pale, tired faces, followed his lead. Some shifted their gaze to their laptops, feigning focus. One offered a nervous, complicit smirk. They were all part of the same organism, and the organism's instinct was to close ranks, to reinforce the hierarchy. Loretta slowly retracted her hand. She straightened her back, the motion fluid and dignified. Her eyes, dark and deeply intelligent, met Thorne's for a fraction of a second. There was no anger in them, no fear. There was only a profound, weary stillness. It was the look of a woman who had absorbed countless such cuts over the years and had learned to form scar tissue so seamless it was invisible to the naked eye. She did not speak. A verbal response would be an escalation, an act of insubordination. It would give him purchase. Her silence, however, was a mirror. It reflected the ugliness of his outburst back at him, unadorned. He was the one who had shattered the room's decorum. He was the one who had lost control. He broke eye contact first, turning back to the scattered documents on the table with a dismissive grunt. The moment had passed. He had asserted his dominance over the lowest status person in the room and could now return his attention to the crisis at hand. For him, the interaction was already forgotten, a minor and necessary exertion of authority. For Loretta, it was not forgotten. It was filed away, another piece of data in a vast internal archive. She registered the tremor of fear in the junior associates, the faint, cloying scent of Thorne's expensive but stale cologne, the specific shade of red on the document's header, confidential draft, Arabic translation. She finished with the wastebasket, tying the bag with a neat, practiced knot. She placed it on her cart. Her gaze swept the room one last time, a professional habit. The fallen paper remained on the floor, an orphaned fact in a room full of opinions. No one else made a move to pick it up. It was beneath them. It was her job, and she had been forbidden to do it. With a soft, nearly inaudible whir of rubber wheels on carpet, she guided her cart out of the boardroom and into the long, silent corridor. The heavy glass door hissed shut behind her, sealing her out, sealing the men and their important anxieties in. The insult hung in the air she left behind, but she refused to carry it with her. She simply left it on the floor with the document, another piece of refuse in a room that desperately needed cleaning. The tension in the boardroom did not dissipate. It congealed, becoming a thick, unbreathable gel of anxiety and forced politeness. Later that afternoon, the delegation from the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund arrived. They were impeccably dressed, their movements radiating a quiet, unshakable authority that made Marcus Thorne's performative power seem brittle by comparison. Loretta was tasked with serving the traditional Arabic coffee, a gesture of hospitality Thorne had read about in a business journal. She moved with grace, holding the silver dalla with practiced ease, pouring small, precise amounts into the delicate cups. As she served the lead delegate, Mr. Al-Jamal, he offered her a brief, courteous nod. It was a simple acknowledgement of a shared custom, a moment of human connection in a sterile room. Thorne saw it. And he couldn't stand it. He needed to re-establish the room's pecking order with himself firmly at the top. As Loretta moved to serve one of his associates, Thorne interrupted her. "That's enough," he said, his voice needlessly loud. He gestured toward her chest, specifically at the plastic rectangle pinned to her uniform. "Her name is Loretta. She works in facilities management. She's here to keep the room tidy, not to host a tea party." He didn't just say her name, he weaponized it. He used her ID badge, the official symbol of her employment, as a label of limitation, a cage of identity. The lead delegate's polite expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Thorne, in his attempt to diminish Loretta, had committed a grave error in hospitality, a sign of poor character. But Thorne was blind to nuance, seeing only the org chart. Loretta felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, a dull, coiling anger she had long ago learned to master. She met his gaze for a barest second before lowering her own, offering a slight, submissive nod that was a masterpiece of misdirection. Inside, she was a fortress of calm. She had learned long ago that the world saw the badge, the uniform, the mop. It was their failure of imagination, not hers. But the public nature of the insult, the way he used her very name to erase her, felt different. It felt like a line being crossed. Would you tolerate being seen but never truly seen? That evening, her shift was almost over. The building was quiet, a hollowed-out shell of its daytime intensity. Her final duty was to clear the confidential waste from the executive floors. In the shred room adjacent to the boardroom, she found the bin overflowing. Among the papers destined for destruction, one caught her eye. It was the same draft from that morning, the one with the red, confidential header. But this one was different. It was crumpled into a tight ball, a clear act of frustration. Someone had thrown it away in anger. She carefully extricated it from the bin. Her fingers, deft and sure, smoothed out the deep creases. It was covered in handwritten Arabic annotations, hurried and agitated. Her eyes scanned the familiar script, and this time she saw what had been missed. It wasn't just a document. It was a story of a negotiation on the brink of collapse, and buried within the elegant calligraphy was a secret she was never meant to find. Thorne's command echoed in her mind, "Don't touch the documents," but it was no longer a threat. It was an invitation. The utility closet on the 35th floor was Loretta's sanctuary. It smelled of lemon polish and industrial disinfectant, a scent she had come to associate with peace. It was small, windowless, and the only place in the entire skyscraper where no one ever looked for her. Under the bare bulb, she laid the crumpled document on an overturned bucket, its pages still bearing the ghost creases of its near demise. This was not just reading. This was analysis. The muscle memory of a past life took over, a life before the navy blue uniform and the quiet, rhythmic sweep of a mop. Her mind, once honed in the demanding corridors of Georgetown law and later in the intricate world of international arbitration in Dubai, reawakened. She wasn't just a woman who spoke Arabic. She was a woman who understood the architecture of language, the load-bearing capacity of a single word, the hidden passages in a subclause. Her finger traced a line of agitated script scrawled in the margin next to a section titled Clause 14, Indemnification and Arbitration. The English text, which she had glimpsed earlier, was standard boilerplate. It was designed to be reassuring. But the Arabic annotations told a different story. She froze. It was a masterfully constructed trap. The Arabic version, which would be the binding text for the Saudi delegation, contained an amendment to the standard clause. The change was subtle, a linguistic Trojan horse. It altered the venue for arbitrating any future disputes from New York, a neutral and predictable legal environment, to Riyadh. And it didn't just apply to disputes over the merger itself, but to all intellectual property held by the newly formed parent company. It was a corporate coup hidden in plain sight. Thorne, in his monolingual arrogance and desperate rush to close, was about to sign away the company's entire patent portfolio, decades of innovation, the very crown jewels, in exchange for a short-term cash infusion. He was so focused on the number on the check that he had missed the dagger hidden in the fine print. The stakes slammed into her with physical force. This wasn't just about Thorne's hubris or a bad deal. This was about the 4,000 employees of this company. The engineers, the marketers, the administrative assistants, the custodians. People she saw every day. People who, like her, were invisible to the men on the 80th floor but were the true lifeblood of the organization. Their jobs, their futures, were tethered to the intellectual property Thorne was about to give away. She looked at the clock on her phone. It was 1047 p.m. on Tuesday. A piece of paper on the boardroom bulletin board had announced the official signing ceremony Friday, 300 p.m. Less than 72 hours. She could walk away. She could shred the document as intended, finish her shift, and go home. It wasn't her problem. She was just facilities management. But the weight of the knowledge was absolute. To know and do nothing was a form of complicity she could not stomach. The choice had been made for her the moment she understood the text. She was no longer just an observer. She was now a participant in the biggest fight this company had ever faced, whether they knew it or not. The clock wasn't just ticking on the deal. It was ticking on her conscience. The next morning, the air on the 80th floor was electric with a strained, artificial calm. Thorne was trying to project confidence, but Loretta could see the frantic energy vibrating just beneath the surface. The official translator, a young man named David Chen who looked barely out of university, was a nervous wreck. He followed the delegates, clutching a leather-bound dictionary as if it were a life raft. Loretta saw her opening. She prepared a fresh pot of coffee, its rich aroma a welcome intrusion into the stale, recycled air of the executive suite. She timed her entrance perfectly, arriving in the corridor just as the delegates paused their conversation, and the translator was frantically flipping through his dictionary, beads of sweat on his brow. She approached him directly, her expression one of simple, professional courtesy. "Coffee," she offered, her voice soft. He barely looked up, mumbling a distracted, "No, thank you." Loretta didn't retreat. She held her ground, her presence a small island of calm in his sea of panic. She leaned in slightly, as if to adjust the cups on her tray, and spoke in a low, clear voice. Not in English, but in the formal, precise Arabic used in high-level legal and diplomatic circles. "Assalamu alaikum. Hal ladayka laza li sol hala siyaghad al-tawid fi al-chukwad. Peace be upon you. You have a moment for a question about the wording of indemnity in contracts." The effect was instantaneous. David Chen froze, his hand hovering over his dictionary. His head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stared at the woman in the janitor's uniform as if she had just sprouted wings. The Arabic she had used was flawless, not the conversational dialect of the street, but the complex, nuanced language of law. It was like a mechanic hearing a passerby perfectly diagnose a subtle engine problem down to the specific model and year. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He stammered a reply in heavily accented textbook Arabic. "Wa talaikum as-salam, naam tafadali, and upon you be peace. Yes, please, go ahead," Loretta continued, her voice never rising above a whisper. "Fi al-band al-r a macron bi litter 2bb ashar, hal al-niya haya al-iktisas al-kadiyi al-mutlak Arabic hamzat talif Arabic meme, al-iktisas al-mushtarak." Regarding Clause 14, is the intent exclusive jurisdiction or shared jurisdiction? She had just handed him the key to the entire problem. His eyes darted from her to the closed boardroom doors and back again. He was terrified and astonished. Who was this woman? The interaction lasted no more than 15 seconds. From a distance, it looked like nothing, a janitor offering coffee to a translator. But from the end of the hall, a young intern named Ben, struggling with a stack of binders, saw the whole thing. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the look on the translator's face. He understood the sudden, focused stillness that had fallen over the two of them. He had just witnessed an invisible person do something impossible, and while the moment passed, the image of it was burned into his memory. Ben was drowning. He was an intern from a state school, a scholarship kid dropped into a piranha tank of Ivy Leaguers, and he was 3 weeks behind on a research assignment that made no sense to him. His nights were spent in the copy room on the 75th floor, a fluorescent-lit purgatory of paper jams and the smell of hot toner. It was there, at nearly midnight, that Loretta found him. He was slumped over a mountain of disorganized documents, his head buried in his hands. A half-eaten bag of vending machine chips lay beside him. He looked up as she wheeled her cart in, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion and defeat. "They're going to fire me if this isn't perfect," he mumbled, more to himself than to her. He gestured at the chaotic mess of papers. "It's for the merger. I'm supposed to create a reference binder for the board, but I don't even know what I'm looking at." Loretta said nothing at first. She simply began her work, wiping down the surfaces, emptying the trash. She moved around him with a quiet respect for his misery. Then, as she passed the table where he sat, she paused. Her eyes scanned the documents upside down. Without asking permission, she reached out and picked up a single sheet. "This sequence is wrong," she said, her voice matter-of-fact, not pitying. She plucked another page from a different pile. "The appendix should precede the signature pages, and your table of contents needs to reference the exhibit numbers, not the page numbers. It's more stable during revisions." Ben stared at her, dumbfounded. How did you know that?" She gave a faint, enigmatic smile. "I notice things. It's part of the job." For the next hour, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered structure. With the precise, efficient movements of a seasoned paralegal, she helped him sort the chaos into coherence. She didn't explain the content of the documents, only their logic, their flow, their relationship to one another. She transformed his mountain of panic into an elegant, organized binder. She created order from chaos, not with a mop, but with her mind. When they were finished, Ben leaned back, looking at the finished product with a sense of awe. He felt a wave of gratitude so immense it left him speechless. For the first time since he'd started this internship, someone had helped him without making him feel small. "I thank you," he stammered. "I don't even know your name." "Loretta," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth before returning it to her cart. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, seeing past the uniform for the first time. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the calm competence in her hands. He had witnessed her speak flawless legal Arabic, and he had just watched her assemble a complex legal binder from scratch. This woman was not a janitor. She was something else entirely, hiding in plain sight. An alliance was forged in that sterile, lonely room, an unspoken bond between two people at the absolute bottom of the corporate ladder. If you were there, would you step closer or stay silent? He knew with a sudden and startling certainty that he owed her. The next day, Ben sought her out. He found her during her lunch break in the cavernous, mostly empty employee cafeteria in the building's basement. The air was thick with the smell of stale pizza and disinfectant. She sat alone at a small table, eating an apple and reading a paperback novel. He approached her table, his hands trembling slightly. "Loretta, can I ask you something?" She looked up, her eyes calm and patient. She bookmarked her page and gave him her full attention. "What I saw yesterday," he began, his voice low, "with the translator, and what you did for me last night. Who are you?" Loretta took a slow bite of her apple. "I'm the person who cleans your office," she said without a trace of irony. "No, I mean." He leaned forward, dropping his voice to a whisper. "You know what's in those documents, don't you? You understand what's happening up there?" She held his gaze, evaluating him. She saw not just curiosity in his eyes, but a genuine, desperate desire to do the right thing. He was out of his depth, but his moral compass was still intact. He was a risk, but he was her only option. She reached into the worn canvas bag at her feet and pulled out the crumpled document she'd rescued from the shred bin. She smoothed it out on the table next to her half-eaten lunch. Then, from his own bag, Ben pulled out the pristine official English version from the binder she'd helped him create. Side by side, they were a study in contrasts, one discarded and covered in frantic notes, the other clean and officially sanctioned. "Look here," Loretta said, pointing with a long, elegant finger to clause 14 in both documents. The English version is the one your boss, Mr. Thorne, has read. It protects the company from liability in case of a dispute. Standard stuff. Her finger moved to the Arabic version. This is the one that matters. This is the one Mr. Al-Jamal and his delegation are reading, and it contains a rider, a small addition that changes everything. She explained it in the simplest possible terms, her voice steady and clear, stripping away the dense legal jargon. The rider states that any and all disputes related to intellectual property, patents, trademarks, copyrights, will be arbitrated in Riyadh, not New York. Ben looked confused. Is that bad? It's catastrophic, Loretta said, her voice dropping, gaining an edge of steel. It means our legal system, our courts, have no jurisdiction. Any disagreement over who owns a new technology or a new discovery would be decided by their courts under their laws. We would have no recourse. We would effectively be handing them the keys to our entire innovation pipeline. It's a complete surrender of our most valuable assets. Mr. Thorne is so focused on the merger's price tag, he's missed the trap. This isn't a merger, it's a hostile takeover disguised as a partnership. The color drained from Ben's face. He finally understood. The abstract legal language suddenly became terrifyingly real. He wasn't just an intern making binders, he was a witness to the heist of the century. The weight of the choice now landed squarely on his shoulders. Comply with the system that was about to destroy itself and lose everything, or resist and risk what little he had. Ben chose to resist. Fueled by a cocktail of terror and righteousness, he went straight to his immediate supervisor, a slick, ambitious junior executive named Garrett. He tried to explain what he'd learned, stammering about jurisdictional arbitrage and mistranslated clauses. He didn't mention Loretta by name, referring to his source only as a consultant he'd spoken with. Garrett listened with a predatory stillness, his eyes narrowing. He saw the situation not as a crisis to be solved, but as an opportunity. This was his chance to prove his loyalty to Thorne and crush a potential rival. He cut Ben off mid-sentence. "A consultant," Garrett sneered. "Let me guess. Does this consultant happen to push a mop for a living? I heard about Chen's little chat in the hallway." Ben's silence was all the confirmation Garrett needed. He snatched the papers from Ben's hand. "You're an intern. You are dangerously out of your lane, and you are listening to absurd fantasies from the cleaning staff. Get back to the copy room before I have you thrown out of this building." Within the hour, the consequences rained down. Garrett went directly to Thorne, spinning a story of an unstable intern being manipulated by a meddlesome janitor, potentially trying to sabotage the deal. Thorne, already paranoid and stretched to his breaking point, exploded. An edict was issued through building security. Loretta's access card was reprogrammed. She was now barred from all floors above the 50th. She was, in effect, quarantined, sealed off from the entire executive level. When she tried to take the elevator to the 80th floor to start her shift, the panel wouldn't even light up. A stern-faced security guard stepped in front of her. "New policy, Loretta," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Mr. Thorne's orders. You're restricted to the lower levels until further notice. He says you're a distraction." The door to the deal floor, the very heart of the crisis, was now literally, electronically, and physically closed to her. Ben was nowhere to be seen, likely reassigned to the mailroom or some other corporate oubliette. Her one tenuous link to the world of the powerful was severed. She was alone, pushed back down into the invisibility the system had designed for her. The system was protecting itself, and it was crushing her in the process. She stood for a long moment in the marble lobby, the silent elevators rising and falling like pistons in a great, unfeeling machine. She could taste the bitter ashes of defeat. It would be so easy to give up, to let Thorne drive his company off a cliff. But as she turned and walked toward the service elevator, her expression hardened. They had taken her access, but they hadn't taken her knowledge. They had closed a door so she would have to find a window. Her fight wasn't over. It had just gone underground. What would you sacrifice to stay true to what you know is right? Confined to the building's lower strata, Loretta became a ghost with a strategy. Her movements were invisible, but her actions were precise. She found Ben in the basement mailroom, his face pale with shame and fear. He was sorting junk mail, a punishment designed to humiliate. They didn't fire you, Loretta stated, not asked. No, worse, they made me irrelevant, he whispered, not looking up from a stack of catalogs. Not yet, she countered. She slid a thick, sealed manila envelope across the sorting table. I need you to do one more thing, and it has to be perfect. Inside the envelope was her masterpiece. It was a meticulously prepared memorandum. On the first page was a side-by-side comparison of the two versions of Clause 14, with the key phrases highlighted. The following pages contained a brilliant, concise legal analysis, citing precedents from both New York state law and international commercial arbitration treaties. It was written with the clarity and authority of a senior partner at a top law firm. It was irrefutable. There is one person on the board who will understand this, Loretta instructed, her voice low and urgent. Her name is Evelyn Albright. She was a partner at Sullivan and Cromwell before she joined the board. She has a legal mind. You will not give this to an assistant. You will not leave it on a desk. You will wait for her outside the ladies' restroom on the 78th floor, and you will place it directly into her hands. You will say only this: a friend asked me to give you this. It's about Clause 14. You understand? Ben nodded, his eyes wide with a renewed sense of purpose. He tucked the envelope inside his jacket. Loretta's second move was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. She went to a payphone in the lobby of a nearby building, a relic of a bygone era, untraceable. She dialed the main number for the hotel where the Saudi delegation was staying. When the operator answered, she asked for Mr. Al Jamal's suite, knowing she would never get through to him directly. As expected, she was connected to his senior aide. Speaking in the same flawless, formal Arabic, she adopted the persona of an anonymous tipster, a concerned third party. Adamana Tatum al-Iz letter 2bb a Macron J. Lakin Hanaka Sol Yajibu letter 1e6d a R letter 1e25 uhu Kabla al-Tia WQ I Macron letter 2bb. I hope I am not disturbing you, but there is a question that must be asked before the signing. The aide was intrigued. Go on, he said. Isl Mustasharakam al-Kanuni and YU letter 2bb a RRIF. Al-SIL letter 1e6d, al-Qa letter 1e0d a Macron, IYY al-KH a Macron letter 1e63 letter 1e63. Akama Haya, Muwadaha Phi al-Band, al-R a Macron B-I letter 2bb Ashar. Ask your legal counsel to define exclusive judicial authority as it is outlined in Clause 14. And then she hung up. She hadn't given them the answer. She had given them the exact question to ask. She had armed them with the key to unlock the trap themselves. The seed of doubt was planted, not in the compromised soil of Thorne's company, but in the fertile ground of their own legal team. Her pieces were now in place on the chessboard. All she could do was wait for the king to be put in check. The call came less than 12 hours later. A panicked summons from Thorne's office. An emergency, all-hands board meeting had been called. The signing was off. The 80th floor boardroom, once a theater of corporate power, was now a courtroom in chaos. The signing had been halted at the 11th hour by Mr. Al Jamal himself, who had calmly stated that his legal team required further clarification on the jurisdictional implications of Clause 14 before proceeding. The phrase, dropped with surgical precision, had detonated the room. Marcus Thorne was imploding. His face was a mask of crimson fury and white-knuckled panic. He paced behind the great mahogany table, barking at his legal team, who offered only baffled shrugs. The translator, David Chen, looked as if he was about to faint. This is a bad faith negotiation tactic. Thorne roared, pointing an accusatory finger at the Saudi delegation, who sat watching him with expressions of cool disappointment. It was then that Evelyn Albright, a woman in her late 60s with piercing blue eyes and an air of unshakable composure, spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through Thorne's tirade like a laser. She held up the memorandum Ben had delivered to her. Marcus, I don't believe this is bad faith, she said, her tone icy. I believe it's due diligence, and I think there has been a fundamental and perhaps catastrophic misunderstanding of the Arabic text. Thorne scoffed, ready to dismiss her, but Mr. Al Jamal nodded slowly. Your counsel is wise, Miss Albright. An impasse. The deal was dead. Thorne's career was evaporating before his eyes. In the stunned, suffocating silence that followed, a small voice piped up from the back of the room. It was Ben. "There is someone who understands it," he said, his voice trembling but clear. All eyes turned to him. "There is someone who can explain." Before Thorne could have him removed, Ben walked to the heavy glass door and opened it. Loretta walked in. She was still in her navy blue janitor's uniform. She carried no briefcase, no documents, no props of power. Her very presence was a quiet indictment of every assumption ever made in that room. A wave of confusion and outrage rippled through the American side of the table. "What is the meaning of this?" Thorne bellowed. Loretta ignored him. She walked with a slow, deliberate pace to the head of the table, directly into the vacuum of power left by Thorne's collapse. She picked up the Arabic version of the contract. The room held its breath. She began to speak first to the Saudi delegation in their own language. Her Arabic was not just fluent, it was eloquent, commanding, imbued with the authority of someone who lived and breathed the nuances of international law. She didn't just translate the words, she illuminated their intent, their history, their devastating legal weight. The delegates leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to rapt attention, then to profound respect. Then, she turned to the board of directors and did the same in English. Her explanation was a masterclass in clarity, a devastatingly precise dismantling of the legal trap. She explained how the shift in jurisdiction wasn't a detail, but the entire design. She laid bare the catastrophic oversight with the calm, dispassionate tone of a professor delivering a lecture. The room was utterly silent. The janitor, the invisible woman, the one forbidden from touching the documents, had taken complete command of the most important meeting in the company's history. Her uniform was no longer a symbol of her station. It was a symbol of an integrity so profound it needed no suit of armor. The power in the room had not just shifted, it had been completely redefined. "Did you feel that shift?" Thorne stared at her, his mouth agape, his face ashen. He had been annihilated, not by a rival executive, but by the quiet competence of a woman he had never even seen. The fallout was swift and brutal. Marcus Thorne was suspended, pending an internal investigation that everyone knew was a formality. His reign was over, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating click of Loretta's words locking into place. The deal with the Saudi fund was not dead, but it was being completely renegotiated, this time with Evelyn Albright and Mr. Al Jamal's legal teams working in full, transparent partnership. That evening, the company's CEO, a man named Richard Sterling who had been largely absent during Thorne's tenure, summoned Loretta to his penthouse office. The view was even more spectacular than the boardrooms, a panorama of city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation. Sterling, looking tired and humbled, gestured for her to sit in one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk. It was the first time she had sat in such a chair in this building. "Loretta," he began, his voice raspy with emotion. "I don't know what to say. Thank you feels inadequate. You saved this company from itself, from me for letting Thorne run unchecked." He opened a drawer in his desk. "Anything you want, it's yours, a bonus. We can make you a vice president tomorrow, head of a new department. You can write your own job description. Name your price. We owe you everything." He was offering her the world she had been excluded from, the power and status she had been denied. He was offering her revenge on a silver platter, Thorne's job, his office, his title. Loretta looked at the man, at the opulent office, at the city glittering below. She thought of the fear in Ben's eyes, the arrogance in Thorne's, the quiet desperation of the thousands of employees who knew nothing of how close they had come to ruin. A promotion felt small. A bonus felt insulting. Revenge felt empty. She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. "I don't want a title, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet but firm, resonating with a power that had nothing to do with her position in the room. "I don't want revenge. Vengeance doesn't fix the system that made Mr. Thorne possible. It just replaces one person with another." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I want a promise. I want you to create a system that sees people. All of them. A system that finds the hidden skills, the overlooked talents of every single employee, from the mailroom to the boardroom. I want you to build a company where a person's value isn't determined by their uniform or their job title, but by their contribution. Her request hung in the air, a radical proposition. It was a choice of soft justice, of healing over retribution. She wasn't asking for a reward for herself. She was asking for a better world for everyone else. What does real justice look like here? Sterling stared at her, a wave of profound respect washing over him. He was not looking at a janitor. He was looking at a leader. The board didn't just agree to Loretta's proposal. They embraced it as a lifeline. They recognized that the company's culture of willful blindness was a far greater liability than any single bad deal. The change that followed was not a vague PR promise. It was a specific, structural, and deeply institutionalized reform. It was officially named the Loretta Initiative. The core of the initiative was the creation of a company-wide internal talent database. It was a confidential, voluntary system managed by the Human Resources Department, championed personally by Evelyn Albright. An email was sent to all 5,000 employees from every division and every level. It invited them to complete a comprehensive skills audit. The audit went far beyond previous work experience. It asked for language fluencies, with proficiency levels rated from conversational to native. It asked for technical certifications, from project management to coding to heavy machinery operation. It asked for academic degrees, published papers, patents held, and even significant volunteer experience that involved complex logistical or managerial skills. The policy, drafted with Loretta's direct input, was codified in the official company handbook on page 27, section 4B. It stated, prior to posting any new position externally, hiring managers are required to query the internal talent database for qualified candidates. A report certifying this search has been conducted must be attached to the hiring requisition. Enforcement was key. Ms. Albright's new internal audit committee was tasked with reviewing these reports quarterly to ensure compliance. Managers who repeatedly failed to utilize the system would see it reflected in their performance reviews and bonus considerations. The initiative was rolled out with a series of town hall meetings, led by the CEO himself. He told the story of Clause 14, not blaming Thorne, but blaming the culture that allowed Thorne's blind spots to become a corporate liability. He held up Loretta not as a mythical hero, but as an example of the extraordinary, untapped potential that he now knew existed throughout the company. The change wasn't just a new rule. It was a new way of seeing. The path was now open. It wouldn't erase bias overnight, and some managers would undoubtedly resist, but the system was now designed to look inward, to find its own strength, to honor the full humanity of every person on its payroll. The invisible were finally being invited to be seen. Weeks turned into a month. Loretta now occupied a small, quiet office on the 75th floor. It wasn't a corner office, and it had no grand view, but it had a door she could close and a window that let in the afternoon sun. She had accepted a one-year consulting contract to help oversee the implementation of the initiative she had designed. She wasn't an executive, she was an architect. Her days were spent not in contentious board meetings, but in quiet conversation with HR analysts, software designers, and department heads, helping them build the new system. One afternoon, Ben stopped by. He was no longer an intern. He had been given a full-time position as a junior analyst, working directly with Miss Albright's team. He carried 2 cups of tea, placing one on her uncluttered desk. "It's working," he said, his voice full of a quiet awe. "We found an accountant in the billing department who has a PhD in statistical modeling. He's being reassigned to the R&D team, and a woman in logistics who is fluent in Mandarin is now helping the international sales team." Loretta smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression. People just needed to be asked. "They listen to you now," Ben said softly, looking around the peaceful office. "Everyone does." Loretta looked out the window at the slice of blue sky visible between the neighboring skyscrapers. "It's not about them listening to me," she replied, her voice thoughtful. "It's about me remembering it was always my voice to use. I just got out of the habit." For years, her intelligence had been a secret she had to guard, a treasure she had to keep buried. The world had demanded she be small, and she had complied for the sake of survival. Now, in the quiet of this simple office, she felt a sense of integration, of wholeness. She was no longer Loretta the janitor or Loretta the hidden legal scholar. She was simply Loretta. She had not been given a new identity by the company. She had finally, fully, reclaimed her own. The uniform was gone, but the dignity it had always concealed was now, finally, visible. The first official Hidden Talents seminar was held in the company's main auditorium. It was an onboarding event for new hires and newly promoted managers. Loretta sat in the front row, not on the stage. She had declined the offer to be a keynote speaker, preferring to remain an observer. At the end of his opening remarks, CEO Richard Sterling paused. "Before we continue," he said, "I want to acknowledge the person who made this entire program, this new chapter in our company's history, possible." A spotlight found Loretta in her seat. She didn't flinch or look away. "Loretta didn't just save a deal," Sterling said, his voice resonating with sincerity. He wasn't speaking in the booming tones of a CEO, but with the measured respect of a student. "She reminded us that a company's greatest assets are often hidden in plain sight. She taught us that competence doesn't have a dress code and integrity doesn't have a title. The principles of this program, of looking deeper, of listening better, of valuing the whole person, are the principles she embodies. Her competence and her character are now part of our company's DNA." Next to him, Evelyn Albright stepped up to the microphone. "We don't call this the Loretta Initiative to build a monument to one person," she added, looking directly at Loretta. "We call it that to serve as a constant reminder of the standard she set, the standard of seeing what others miss." The applause was warm and genuine. It was not a thunderous, dramatic ovation for a savior. It was a sustained, heartfelt acknowledgement of a teacher. The recognition was focused squarely on her intellectual and moral contribution. It wasn't a story about a janitor who got lucky. It was a story about an institution that was finally smart enough to learn from one of its wisest members. In the back of the auditorium, a young woman in the new hire orientation group, whose resume listed classical archaeology alongside data entry, lowered her head and smiled. A door had been opened. A few days later, a box arrived at Loretta's office. It contained the last of her personal effects from the locker she had used in the basement. Tucked inside, amongst a spare pair of comfortable shoes and her well-read paperback novel, was her old janitor ID badge. She picked up the worn piece of plastic. Her name, Loretta Hale, was printed in stark block capitals. Beneath it, the title that had defined her existence in this building for 3 long years, Facilities Management. She ran her thumb over the smooth, laminated surface. This small rectangle had been the lens through which everyone, from Marcus Thorne to the newest intern, had viewed her. It was a symbol of her invisibility, a tool of dismissal, a physical manifestation of a box they had tried to put her in. Thorne had pointed to it to shame her. The security guard had referenced its limitations when he blocked her from the elevator. It was meant to be the full stop at the end of her story. But looking at it now, in the quiet sunlight of her new office, it felt different. It no longer carried the sting of humiliation. The plastic rectangle had not been a cage, it had been a disguise. It had granted her access to the hidden corners of the company, to the conversations people thought no one was hearing, to the discarded documents people thought no one could read. It had been her shield and her secret weapon. It was not a trophy to be framed on the wall, nor was it a painful memory to be thrown in the trash. It was simply a fact. A part of her journey. It represented the beginning of a story, not the end. It was a testament to the quiet, unyielding strength of a woman who knew her own worth, even when no one else did. Did the object's meaning change for you too? She opened the top drawer of her new desk, the one that held pens and notepads, and placed the badge inside. She closed the drawer with a soft, final click. She had acknowledged its place in her past. Now, she was ready for the future. The final scene is 6 months later. The lobby of the corporate headquarters is bustling with its usual morning energy. A tour for a group of business school students is passing through, the guide pointing out the architectural features and the company's art collection. The guide pauses in front of a newly mounted bronze plaque, its surface gleaming under the recessed lighting. It is simple, elegant, and conspicuously positioned next to the main elevator bank leading to the executive floors. There is no portrait, no grand mission statement. It bears only a single, powerful inscription. This company was rebuilt on the integrity of those who see what others miss. Nearby, Ben, now looking confident and composed in a well-fitting suit, is talking to a brand new intern. He sees the tour group looking at the plaque and gestures toward it with a subtle nod. "That's the most important thing you need to know about working here," he says to the intern, his voice low but clear. "Talent is everywhere. You just have to be willing to look." The intern nods, her eyes wide with understanding. The camera pushes past them, lingering on the plaque. The reflection of the busy lobby moves across its polished surface. People of all types in suits and uniforms, carrying briefcases and cleaning carts, all part of the same organism, but seen now in a new light. The room is the same, but the air has changed. The rules that govern the space have been fundamentally, permanently rewritten. The frantic energy of the company has found a new, quiet center of gravity. Justice, in its most meaningful form, has arrived not with a thunderous ovation, but with the silent, enduring presence of a new idea. Is the quietest change sometimes the most powerful? The image holds on the plaque, a testament to a legacy of quiet dignity before fading to black.